Okay, this podcast is also going to be recorded as a YouTube video, so you may be watching these slides at the same time, or you may just be listening to this as an audio. I want to talk about briefly TMA6 and then move on to discussing the EMA. Whenever we discuss the EMA and the examined component of the course, this does provoke some anxiety. Hopefully what we can do today is address that and take you through some of that fear barrier and start preparing properly to think about how you're going to do this EMA, what's required, and most importantly how you can do well at it. Okay, so let's have a little thought briefly about TMA06. And the question is, assess the role of information and communication technologies, brackets ICTs, in the emergence and successes of networks of dissent. Hopefully you'll have done the reading in the book and you will be familiar by what we mean by networks of dissent, although you may want to question whether these are forms of dissent or perhaps they're actually forms of citizenship, but you can start thinking about that. I think this question brings into play theories about the role of technology, and we might look to some of the Marxists who have a form of kind of technological determinism, that capitalism brings forth certain technologies and that brings forth a certain type of society, so you may wish to investigate that. It may also bring into question for you the form of the international order, in that are we looking at questions about the emergence of a global civil society, or are we looking at the appearance of blocks of different cultures, or maybe we're looking at something that's sort of different between different societies, and that this is not about a liberal order that's rule governed, but maybe something more anarchical. So those will be themes you can pick up. Then we might want to differentiate between emergence from successes, in that just because something has emerged doesn't mean it's successful. What are the metrics of success? How could we understand success? That may be very important to differentiate between. You may think that at the present time these technologies have emerged, but they are yet to be actually successful. Now obviously one of the challenges we have with the course material is that they did not anticipate or imagine, I think, the role of ICT in things like the Occupy movement, the Arab Spring, and you may wish to bring in some extra material to investigate that. You don't have to, that's entirely at your discretion. But it's certainly one of the cases where the course material does look somewhat dated, and so you may wish to update that and think about that in fresh terms. As always, we will be looking for a clear structure and a clear argument, a well-written and polished assignment. At the same time, this can be taken a number of ways, and you need to think that through and take that through in a way that interests you and a way that you think you can make a convincing argument. So I think it looks an interesting and quite exciting assignment, so I'm looking forward to reading your responses to that. And for some of you, it may also be about preparation for the EMA in terms of finding and using material. So I don't want to linger too much on TMA6 because I think you are well prepared to deal with that. Obviously, if you're in need of more materials, get in touch with me and talk to me about that. Okay, let's turn to the EMA. Okay, just to have a look at the form of the EMA. Now, on the forum there are quite a lot of materials and very specific guidance about the EMA, and I would strongly suggest that you read that and reflect upon it. This is an examined component. Your role, my role, are very detailedly prescribed, and so all of us have to conform to that. So make yourself familiar with those guidelines, which you can find on the course website. Essentially what we are asking for is a 4,000 word assignment. This is submitted in a paper format, this is not an e-format, so take a look at the assessment guidance as to what they want you to do. It's not my responsibility to make sure that you have done that. In fact, as I'll detail, my responsibilities are very specific in this process, so you need to be familiar with what you need to do. You need to have sent to me, either as an email or on paper, an essay plan by the 18th of May. Again, I will not issue any reminders. It's not my role to issue reminders. You are responsible for doing that. The purpose of the essay plan is that it's a milestone for you to make sure that you're planning and thinking about this EMA, and also it allows me to verify that your assignment when you submitted it is something that I recognise as an anti-cheating measure. The EMA has to be submitted by the 7th of June. Again, look at the assessment guidance as to what you are to do. During this period, my role as the tutor is to support you in your studies. I can talk about how you write a 4,000 word assignment to some degree, but I cannot comment on the content of your EMA or the question. And in this presentation, none of these questions are this year's EMA questions, and I will not be commenting upon them. Okay, that's part of the examined component. Okay, this I have lifted directly from the assessment guidance as to what we are requiring of an essay plan. It is a note, ideally 2 sides, of which question you have chosen to answer, and a sketch of the main headings and the subheadings you are going to use, a list of the materials drawn from the coursework, as well as what other materials you may be using, concepts, models, that kind of thing, and then a preliminary list of your main non-module materials. We'll talk about what those are shortly, but that's what we need to see in this 2 sides of A4. Just to repeat, I have put in bold on these slides, it's your responsibility to do this. I keep a copy of what you've done, but it's not my responsibility to tell you or remind you to do this. With regard to external materials, you'll see that we are very specifically asking for 2 academic journal articles and 3 documents that you have downloaded from the internet, or equivalent amount of non-module material. So in those terms of, don't think about substituting the journal articles, but by 3 documents you may choose to use a podcast, you may choose to use some other media, but that's the sort of thing that we're looking at. And in sense, earlier TMAs we have rehearsed what you may use. And also note that we suggest that you don't do more than that, because that is going to be a lot of work in itself, finding and selecting these materials. Okay, when we come to the scale of this task, looking at 4,000 words, which in some ways is a lot of words, it's certainly enough words for you to get very tangled up in, but at the same time it's not a huge number of words given the volume of materials that we are expecting you to have reviewed and used in this work. For the first time, I would suggest that you do make use of subheadings in helping you guide yourself through the writing and also the reader. We'll come to references shortly, but you need to be on to those and very precise. I would suggest that once you have a draft, that you polish it and then revise that draft and then polish it again. Do not be surrendering marks or distracting the marker by not having a piece of work that is very well finished. Okay, I've had a look at the previous year's questions for the EMA, and they're coming up now. I don't want to rehearse these in any detail, but what I would suggest to you is just spend 10 minutes practicing, thinking about how you might answer these questions, and then do the same with the EMA questions for this year, including those that you don't intend to answer. Because what I think is very helpful to do is just have like a mental warm-up, a rehearsal of how might I answer a question. Think about your form, think about structure, think about the materials you might use. Just a little rehearsal, a little revisional tool, but it gives you an idea of what kind of processes you may need to go through. So just revise, rehearse, just a 5 minute bang. How might I write that question? Just as a little exercise. Do that for these few questions coming up, and do that for the EMA questions that you are not going to answer, because I think that's very useful also in demarcating the materials in the course that you may wish to use. Starts those sort of mental processes going. So these are last year, so I'm not going to linger on these, but first one is a realm of recurrence and repetition. Evaluate this view of the limits of change and transformation in the state system. The next one is culture and the ideas of human rights play little role in changing or transforming international order. Evaluate this claim. Third one, the rise of networks and ICTs are transforming the international system. To what extent do you agree with this statement? Again, these are kind of familiar questions in some ways, posed in different forms, requiring subtly different answers, but at the same time you can see that we are rehearsing the same terrain, and it might help you focus in on what needs to be done. Okay, although this may not feel like it to some of you, I've actually been quite liberal in referencing, in that what I have said all of the time is that what I want is a referencing system that is logical and coherent and does the task of referencing that I wanted to see, i.e. allowing me to make a judgment as to what you've been reading and to track that back. That ends now, in that what you need to do is reference as it says in the guide. That is how the examiners want to see the referencing system. Just do it. It's not an argument, it's not a discussion, this is marks, this is grades, just do that. And I've put on screen here some examples, but if you're not looking at the screen version, just have a look. I've taken these from the referencing guide, which incidentally has also been on our forum for the last 4 or 5 months. So, make yourself familiar with this and do it. It's not a question of debate. Okay, so when you're using this system, what I'd point out to is that the citations in the text of your work contain the name, date, and very importantly, page numbers. The name should refer to the author of the chapter, not the editors of the books. If you are citing a third person, use the name, where this was cited in, name, date, page number. Okay, there are worked examples of this in the referencing guide. Look through it if in doubt. And all quotations, even those that are put in a block form outside of your paragraph, should be in quotation marks. Okay, so these are simple, easy points to gain, but don't distract the examiner by not doing it. Okay, this is just a little reminder of the importance of writing in your own words. I've only thrown this in because I'm very conscious that in a pressure situation, sometimes people do odd things. They do things that in other circumstances they would not do. I don't for a moment believe any